Welcome to the Elder Scrolls Legends Master Series Championships at QuakeCon. I am your host, Lasergician, and I am joined by some of the best casters I could think of. We got Community Manager, Best Biceps in Tessel, CVH.
How's it going, everybody?
Master Series Furniture and Disappointed Uncle of Tessel, Charmer.
Hello.
Second Best Beard and Washed Up player, TDC Jason on the end.
Hello.
How's everyone doing today?
I'm doing
Well-
fantastic, because you said TDC Jason was washed up and I'm not, so that's my win for today.
There we go.
I'm doing as well as can be expected, ever from me. But I'm really excited for the games that we're going to get to see today because this is our first big tournament post Moons of Elsewhere. We're going to see new cards in action on the big screen, and that gets me very excited.
And TDC Jason, card designer for Sparky Pants, had a hand in that Moon of Elsewhere expansion himself.
Absolutely. This is an awesome opportunity to see the play from this side of the desk. Last year, I got a chance to play on the other side as a player, and this year it's going to be great to see the way that the players get to play with the cards that I got to see a little earlier.
I bet that's exciting. So let's talk really quickly about what we've seen leading up to this tournament. We've had 4 qualifiers as well as the last chance qualifier. Plenty of time to see these players in action, but we haven't seen the Moons of Elsewhere cards actually get used yet. Are there any, let's talk broad strokes here, that you're expecting? Just going down the line real quick.
Well, I think the big card on everyone's mind is Alfie Conjurer, so we're definitely going to see a ton of that card in Battle Mage, Guildsworn lists, and even some other less popular classes that people have brought. Overall, I think Moons of Elsewhere has been a really impactful expansion, so I think the shape of the meta for this tournament is going to be quite different than what people might have seen if they watched the open qualifiers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as far as new cards go, Mercenary Captain is one to keep an eye on because there's a few go-wide decks in the field that are going to be taking advantage of that. And another thing worth mentioning in my mind is that when we got the expansion, there was also some balance adjustments made, and I think the absence of cast into time is another thing to watch in this particular tournament.
Yeah, I think that the word of the day is going to be mid-range in part because of the Alfie Conjurer, but I think that you're going to see some other Moons of Elsewhere highlights with the different consume cards, so we're going to get a little bit of both.
And let's not forget, these are all just tools that our players have in order to get themselves a piece of the $50,000 prize pool. We have a lot of really, really great players, all of whom are going to be looking to get a shot at that action. It's the biggest prize pool we've had in a very long time. I have to imagine everyone is really excited to get a shot at it.
Absolutely. $20,000 for first is a really big deal. It's a pretty good payday, even if you happen to lose in the quarterfinals, but the prize pool increases significantly every single round. So a lot of pressure constantly on all of these players, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk really quickly about the players that we have playing today. We've got the first match is Thuldir versus Flow. Thuldir, one of those perennial tournament players, high ladder finishes every season, high tournament finishes every time he gets a shot at it. And Flow, right there up with him, high ladder finishes every time, and managed to get in on points into the last chance qualifier. Really good performances so far. What do you think about this first matchup?
I think it's going to be a real bloodbath. It's pretty easy to peg Thuldir as one of the early favorites. He, along with QuakeCon Jewel, were the 2 competitors last year at the Masters at QuakeCon. So Thuldir finished in top 4, losing to the eventual champion, Please Don't Hack Me. He's out to sort of reclaim that final spot that he narrowly missed out on last time. Meanwhile, Flo had kind of a heartbreaker season, right? He performed really reasonably the entire season, placed in the points, all 4 qualifiers, but never got that elusive first place finish, and even in the last chance qualifier was barely outside of top 2. So he has one of the most consistent records here because he was forced to be consistent all season to get here because he didn't get that early win like Thuldir. So maybe you could even count that as experience being on his side since he was forced to play so much this season.
Yeah, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Seeing if he can break that streak today. Charmer, who else in this lineup are you really keeping your eye on today?
QuakeCon Jewel. I told him before the start, pressure's on, buddy, because I consistently say that I think he's the best player in the game. He has mechanical soundness, right? He's always making good decisions at the right time when he's playing the game, but he's also a fantastic deck builder. You're going to see his lineups when we get to the point where we're talking about it, a lot of 1 and 2 ofs because he likes to say, I put cards in because if I need them, eventually I'll draw them. And he's shown over and over again that that is truth. So for me, I think he's just the odds-on favorite to win the entire thing.
And speaking of deck building, we have a couple decks that are being brought almost ubiquitously across the board, and some decks that are kind of dark horses. I think we're going to bring that up in just a second. Jason, talk to me a little bit about this spread of decks that people have decided to bring today.
So yeah, regarding the mid-range battle mage, so because that's going to be one of the biggest points of contention during the day, you expect to see a lot of that, and Guildsworn really borrows from that. So you're going to see a little bit of that taste of the mid, but on the slightly higher side. Whereas then we get into a lot of aggressive decks down toward the Halalu, and some of the more interesting like singleton decks that you wouldn't necessarily expect are going to play in a way that you don't see from those top decks that are being brought, like Battle.
Yeah, and let's take a quick look at the schedule so we can know when we expect to see all of these great decks in action. We have a phenomenal lineup of players. I can't wait to see all of them play throughout the course of the day. If you're interested in what time these games are going to be playing, remember this is just a rough schedule that we're going to be showing in just a minute, but at least get the order of what's going to be going on. The schedule, we're going to start off around a little bit with Thuldir versus Flow. Kara versus Weta going to follow them, Super versus Fafal, and then Frenzy and Boom's Life are going to round out the quarterfinals.
That's an amazing lineup. I'm really excited for that. And like to even see players like Boom's Life and Weta, who notably they were really big players back in like 2016. They took sort of extended breaks, and they're back in full force this season. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to start seeing their matches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Wita is another person to kind of highlight just because you did see 6 Battle Mage lists represented, but his list is a bit interesting, right? It's not a traditional mid list, so even though that looks like a lot of mid Battle Mage, it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and that's something you might see more of in a closed deck list tournament where maybe he brings Battle Mage and his opponents expect it to be mid-range, but in this tournament, both players have access to the other's deck lists prior to the tournament and during the matches, so he just thinks it's that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he chose a different Alfiq. He chose the Prowl Smuggler. So he decided to go much lower, and he's trying to get under those other mid-range decks.
And we got Thuldir and Flow, obviously, as the first game going on. Let's take a look at their lineups when we get a second, but we've taken a look on our own in the last couple of days. Is there anything that really stood out to you about these two players, particularly in how their decks are going to match up against each other?
What do you think, Charmer?
So, yeah, I'll go first. One of the things that stood out to me right away is that Thuldir brought decks that attack, right? So Thuldir is kind of known for being a control player, but he's brought this Empire deck, and you're seeing that on screen right now, that is a very low-to-the-ground, aggressive list. He also brought a Halalu list that's aggressive, and Battle Mage, as we know, can certainly be proactive if you draw the right half of your deck. So while he's traditionally a player known for very long control games, in fact, last year at the Master Series, he had one of the tightest matches and comebacks I've ever seen in this game. This time, he's going to be on the offensive. And we know that Flow, when we get to his lists, also has some very aggressive lists. So I think CVH hit the nail on the head. It is going to be a bloodbath. You're going to see a lot of combat, creatures dying, people taking damage all over the place, and that's just, it's different from Thuldir.
Attacking, it's how you win.
Is it?
Not the way you win.
Yeah. So, and with the Flow deciding to
Yeah, Flo is one of those players who has been playing mid-range for years. It's something he's very, very comfortable on. Brought 2 of those lists between Battle Mage and Dagoth, as well as 2 varieties of Halalu, if you want to think about Crusader as basically Halalu without green.
One of the things I find the most interesting here is that all of Flo's decks, I mean, he has his own spin on them, but they're all decks that you'd really expect to see, and that we see in more numbers than one. But the Empire deck that Thuldir brought, that's the only one of its kind in the entire tournament, so maybe the series, if it isn't banned, might come down to how well or not so great that particular deck performs, because Thuldir is the one of the entire field that has the faith in it.
And I want to talk about something you just mentioned, Charmer. Let's talk ban strategies. If you're Thuldir, you're looking at a couple mid-range decks, a couple aggressive decks, and you know Flo as a player from having played with him in prior tournaments, matching on him with ladder many, many times over. What's your thought coming into this if you're in Thuldir's seat?
If I'm Thuldir, I'm strongly considering banning the Dagoth deck. And I know it's pronounced Dagoth, but I'm going to say Dagoth all day so you can deal with it.
You know, I will too. Solidarity.
So the reason that I think that's the one that you target is because you've got 2 aggressive lists, and then you essentially have 2 mid-range lists, but the Dagoth/Dagoth, however you want to pronounce it, list is the one that has the best way to stabilize by gaining health, right? Hand of Dagoth specifically is a phenomenal card in aggressive matchups. And so that's the one that makes it kind of unique. It stands out. Battle Mage can certainly fight for the board and control it, but if it gets low on health, it doesn't have a way to recuperate, so you can finish it off with reach. Dagoth has a number of ways. You've got Queen Baron Zaya, et cetera, that you can get health back, get out of the critical range. I think that is what I would want to target. I don't want to run into that if I'm Flow, or Thuldir, excuse me.
And Jason, let's take it on the other direction. You're Flo, you're this incredibly handsome 22-year-old American man who has made it to the Masters Series Finals. You're against Thuldir. And quick fun fact there, I was interviewing everyone yesterday, and I asked everyone who they're most afraid of. The first most popular answer was, well, I'm afraid of everyone, which makes sense. There are a lot of really scary players here. The second answer that was the most popular was Thuldir. Everyone thinks that he is a very strong player to look out for. If you're Flo in the first round, what are you looking to take away from Thuldir to give yourself the best chance?
I think I would look to take away Guildsworn. I would look to try to narrow the types of decks that you're going to play to make them directly like aggro versus aggro and aggro versus the low mid, and try to take away the higher trollish options.
Well, it sounds like our players are ready to join us on stage, so we're going to hear a few of their thoughts as they manage to make their way to the stage for round one starting in just a little bit. Gentlemen, start thinking about your predictions. Look at them, the perennial gentlemen shaking hands before a match. If this is a bloodbath, it's going to be the most proper one that we can find at the beginning today.
Yeah, it's like an old gentleman's duel.
Really, it is,
Yeah.
though, isn't it?
You always smile before you put the knife in somebody's back.
I'm afraid of the confidence with which you said that.
I'm glad we're over here.
So, gentlemen, we have a fantastic first match on our hands. I'm going to ask you the most tough question I can give casters right before a match. CVH, who's going to win?
Oh, of course you'd start with me, so I can't use better players' answers to base around my own.
That's my job. I'm the worst player using better players.
Man, I'm torn because I really want to see the Empire deck do well, but I really like Flo's lineup. I think Dagoth is super strong. It'll probably get banned, but you know, I've got to give it to Flo. I think he came in at the last minute as a replacement player. He's super excited to be here. I know he put in the work to test. I'm going to go with Flo.
All right, one for Flo.
I think Thuldir ends up taking the series. I think it's going to be incredibly tight, but while he is very, very nice in person, when it comes to playing the game, Thuldir is like a James Bond villain, and I have a hard time betting against him, so I think Thuldir takes this.
Jason, tiebreaker here.
I think Thuldir has a great chance of taking it. That's who I would put my money on. I think that he has opportunity to really get under the decks that Flo has. I think that's where we're going to see it go.
All right, so that is our predictions from the casting desk. Really quickly, while they're setting up, any key cards that I, as a viewer backstage, while I let you gentlemen handle this, should be keeping an eye out for? You mentioned that Hand of Dagoth as potentially a key card if that's not banned. Any others that you're really keeping an eye out for?
Well, I think we should maybe even start a count of how many times we see Alfie Conjurer. So if you haven't gotten familiar with Alfie Conjurer, you will be familiar with it very soon after at least this match or some of our other matches.
And it looks like we have the bans in. Flo will not be able to play the Battle Mage, the Dagoth with no green.
So surprising.
And, yeah, right? Flo, the Battle Mage player, not playing Battle Mage. Thuldir not going to play the Guildsworn. Charmer, Jason, what do you two think about these bans?
I'm shocked, personally. I fully expected the Dagoth list to be the ban target. Perhaps they really are afraid of Alfie Conjurer, but if I'm playing an aggressive lineup, then I think I'm afraid of Hand.
And Jason, real quick.
And I really like the Guildsworn taking away the top the control-ish archetype to make it Thuldir have to focus on winning with the aggro. He's going to have to attack.
All right. Well, with our predictions out of the way, everyone knows what to look out for. I believe it is just about time for us to get into the game. You guys excited? 'Cause I'm feeling pretty excited. Master Series finally starting. I'm stoked.
All right, the crowd won me over. Now I'm excited.
All right, we've got to warm your icy heart at some
Yeah.
point along the day. It's
It
going to happen.
takes some time to thaw, mate.
So, Jason, looks like we're just spending one more moment. Does anyone have any final thoughts about this?
I don't know. So this is a really complicated format. What do you guys think we're gonna see queued first? I know it's kind. Some players even randomize it, like they'll flip a coin before a roll a die or something. Or do you think there's a good deck for either of these players to start with? Charmer?
Absolutely. I start with Dagoth if I'm Flow. I'm going to show you why you should have banned it. I also think that his mid-range lineup is very good at pivoting between being proactive and reactive. So it's got a game plan for just about every scenario. So it's also a safe starting pick, and you can use your other picks to kind of adjust based on how the first game goes.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that Hand of Dagoth is not banned because it does such a unique thing in a field of aggro. Like that card gives me anxiety playing mid-range mirror matches.
And that is the benefit of playing mid-range. You get an opportunity to respond to however your opponent plays. I'd look to see that as one of the opening choices.
Yeah, and these choices matter a lot. As we know, we are playing a last class standing format, which means that as soon as you are out of decks to play, you're eliminated. You lose on a deck, you can no longer queue that in the match. So getting these first wins early, get your momentum going, can be very important.
Hey, you might even 3-0 somebody. I mean, we see a lot of 3-2 victories in last class standing because if you lose, you can then queue up a counter to what you just lost to, assuming, of course, that your lineup is built well. But yeah, we could even see something like Dagoth just draw the right cards, namely Queen and Hand a lot, and maybe even go for the 3-0 if that's what's queued first. Or maybe he saves it for last and then the reverse sweep happens, which is always fun too.
Yeah, there's always that. And that's one of the things I love about Legends, is you can get those really tense moments, both within a series with do you have a deck that can come back, and within the mechanics. You have things like prophecies that can swing a game very heavily if you manage to get the right one, and you can get that card advantage built up and get a swing turn coming later. Do we think that kind of mechanic or the lane system maybe might be particularly important for any of these decks in this match?
I think specifically the Empire deck that Thuldir brought is going to make great use of the lane system because that's the mechanic that Empire is kind of built around. It's also the kind of deck that you want to go wide with. You want presence in both lanes to play cards like Pit Lion. So absolutely, at least in that scenario, it's going to be a factor.
And even more than those specific strategies, I'm looking for low-cost cards and seeing how those early turns develop because it's going to dictate the way that everything else goes. And it looks like we're
Here we go. Game 1, Flow versus Thuldir. Game 1 in the Master Series on the day. Casters, are you excited? Let's get into this.
I'm so excited, and we're already seeing some sparks fly. Deepwood Trapper already before Thuldir can even get anything on the board.
Adapt and survive.
So Thuldir here is answering with this Doomfang ally. Does catch the ward, which is pretty fantastic because that means over time it will be able to trade with this big Deepwood Trapper and give you kind of a 2-for-1 card advantage in the process.
And in addition to that, having the ring, the ability to Earthbone Spinner to remove the Scimitar from the Deepwood Trapper, give you an opportunity to then trade that Doomfang into potentially a new field lane play that
You
Flow might
can't
have.
beat me.
And don't let that sound fool you. That is not a Cliff Racer. That is a Wily Bird instead, but they do share a very similar sound effect.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Thuldir, you really would have liked to go for that because he had such a slow start. I mean, if he could have hit the blue and the red with the Doomfang ally to get the ward and the 5 attack, that would have been fantastic. Right now, he's in kind of an awkward spot because his hand doesn't deal too well with the board as it stands, but he has the really powerful potential for a turn 5 Breton Conjurer Rapid Shot. Could even use Rapid Shot Skaven to start clearing up things now.
And the follow-up play on the following turn, rewarding the Breton Conjurer and then having the Skaven to follow up. And Flow's already left 1 magic on the table with playing the Wily Kiva with his 3 magic a turn.
I
So
fight with the fervor of the wild
So
hunt.
I do like this kind of proactive response. He's saying, you know, I could take the long game. I could just trade, maybe develop something, and then try to clear next turn. But making sure you get a threat off the board and have 2 bodies means that you're kind of asserting control of this field lane right now. And that is important because in the field lane, as you know, the player who has the most bodies kind of has initiative, right? They dictate the pace there, and if he can push Flow to the shadow lane, that'll be a big victory.
Yeah, and that draw from Flow was absolutely huge. He was desperately needing something to play this turn, and he got probably the best turn 4 play in his deck. 5/5 with no real drawback.
yeah, really, Thuldir was looking for a warm body, and he found one of the warmest
My
with our
blade is death
premium
to
Black Dragon.
Now, this is very, very interesting because by playing it in the shadow lane, he is kind of conceding the field lane here, as we talked about. So that's it might not seem like a big deal, but that's actually a pretty big victory for Thuldir, because now when he does play this Breton Conjurer, the giant guard's going to pop up there, and he can start controlling this game from both sides.
Yeah, and as Jason mentioned, the Lesser Ward already in the hand, so assuming the Breton Conjurer survives, it won't be long until a second Frost Astronaut comes down. It doesn't look like Flow, barring a crazy Mudcrab Merchant if he chooses to go that route, which is quite questionable. You know, he doesn't have anything to deal with the 1-1.
And we see really a rope-a-dope here with Black Dragon going into the Shadow Lane, drawing the Breton Conjurer and potential other Astronauts. And now Flow's been able to retransition into field, and you're getting an example of the lane system and how you can move back and forth and strand opponents' cards.
There's the Lesser Ward, there's the Rapid Shot, and he can even clear up the field lane with a Skaven if he chooses to. Of course, now he has a Wardcraft or Harpy, a lot of options for taking a little control over the field lane, since the 5/5s for now are in the wrong spot.
Yeah, this is actually a really fantastic hand for Thuldir, because if you try to pivot back to the Shadow Lane at any point, you have to deal with the guard, and that Conjurer can be hit with the Wardcrafter, as you said, to make yet another 5/5. Meanwhile, you have initiative in the field lane. Yes, it's just a Skaven, but with the Cradle Crush as backup in your hand, you have a lot of ways to kind of clear and control that. He's in a very good position right now.
Yeah, Flow still has things to do this turn, but it's looking like, depending on the next couple draws, that could run out fairly quickly, and Thuldir is well equipped to deal with a lot of the things he can play.
Yeah, from a strategy standpoint, one of the things that would be interesting is if Flow almost decided to take this turn off, you could do something where you just develop Divine Fervor and play the Mud Crab to kind of dig, and that sets you up with a bigger Cliff Racer to maybe answer something next turn. It also means that Thuldir, if he chooses to attack you, might give you more ammunition, because as you know, you draw cards when runes are broken, so...
Yeah, and it looks like, if I'm looking at the deck list correctly, Thuldir's only support removal is Belligerent Giant, which would be one turn too expensive, so you could do that, and you would know that at least this turn your Divine Fervor would stay alive, and you'd get to play Cliff Racer or whatever else next turn. But we're starting with the Crab. Guys, we're seeing Crab again, second Master Series in a row. It is the year-long reign of Mudcrab Merchant.
So what are you hoping to pull here, Jason? If you play a Mud Crab and you're in this kind of position, you know you're on your back foot, what are you hoping to see?
I'm hoping to see something that gets rid of the Conjurer.
I'm hoping to see another Mudcrab. Always.
So it looks like Flow's decision was between Tome of Alteration and the Corporus disease, and opted to go with the Tome.
Yeah, I can see that being a really tough decision, because you have a card that cycles, very powerful to draw more cards, and then you have a Silence. And Silence, that could be used offensively or defensively because it gives a buff, so I'm pretty sure Thuldir's kind of happy to see that kind of a flexible, cheap card in his hand.
Yeah, having to give up the Silence is a big deal, because that was a potential to go through a guard or to shut down this Breton Conjurer that has kind of single-handedly won the Shadow Lane for you. So I understand taking the Tome, being able to get deeper into your deck while also buffing a creature is also a very powerful effect. But right now, that Breton Conjurer has to be dealt with, or you just never interact with that Shadow Lane again.
Yeah, I could see that decision going differently if Flo was in more of a driver's seat. You take the Corpus Disease and push lethal, but it does buff whatever it silences too, so it's kind of scary to use it on your opponent's thing if you're not ready to kill them, because right now Thuldir is in full control.
And it looks like Thuldir will continue to give Flow more cards, so the Tome drawing a card may be less relevant as we move on. And in consecutive draws, Flow has found more cards that draw other cards.
So this Cliff Racer play, it looks like it's going to be going into the field. Oh, backing out for a moment, but I suspect they want to either make a trade or do something here to kind of get things under control.
Trading.
And I'm wrong. I am wrong. That is a face racer, not a trade racer, and it decides to attack.
Yeah, I kind of get this, because Flo has already the Crusader's Assault and Tome. Divine Fervor is live, and there's not really a clean way to get rid of it. Like, Belligerent Giant would be very slow here. So basically, he's saying Thuldir has the value. He has a full grip of probably great cards, including, we know, the Corpus Disease. So I just have to win before he does, which is going to be pretty hard anyway, because it's a lot of damage coming in.
It's a potential winning line, but it's also one that may get blocked a little bit by the Mighty Conjuring that's in Thuldir's hand.
Yeah, and look at the burst damage in Thuldir's hand as well, with the Lightning Bolt and the Sentinel Battle Mace.
Yeah, Thuldir is on the aggressive right now. When you have Lightning Bolt and Battle Mace, that represents 8 additional damage in your hand for the price of 8 Magicka. So next turn, those are going to come online and essentially kind of lock this game into place, barring some sort of last-second prophecy.
Yeah, there is no clean answer for this 8/8 Atronach right now. What do you do here if you're Flow? You could gain a little bit of life with Bruma Profiteer. You can get rid of the Atronach, but it does cost you 7 Magicka worth of Tome and Crusader's Assault, and your entire board dies in the process. Starting with the Tome, drawing a card.
Does pick up a Dawnbreaker, which gives him an opportunity to actually get rid of the Atronach, but unfortunately, it's not going to be anything that helps him stabilize, and as we know, there is 8 damage sitting in Thuldir's hand.
Yeah, and even if he didn't have Lethal, he could use that Lightning Bolt to clear up, but it looks like we're going to see the Corpus Disease. And the Battle Maze comes down. Thuldir cleans up Flow's Slalu deck and takes game 1. That was a masterclass in how good the Atronachs can be, Breton Conjurer, and Thuldir's off to a game 1 lead. What do you guys think about this? Did it go as expected, the matchup-wise, or?
I think you really saw what mid-range Battle Mage has to offer, the way that it transitioned from trying to stop the field lane into immediately owning the shadow lane and not being afraid to push damage and end the game before Flow had a chance to recoup.
Yeah, I think that what you really saw there was a mid-range Battle Mage when it draws the control half of its deck. So it's certainly a mid-range deck. That means it can be aggressive and it can be reactive. But this was a period where it drew Skaven Pyromancer at one of the best times that you could have. It really kind of won the field lane when that came down. And then it also was able to use Breton Conjurer to lock out the shadow lane. So great performance, but it drew the right half of its deck.
Yeah, that rewarding, like the combination of having multiple rapid shots and ward crafters and Breton Conjurer, it's been a scary hand for that kind of deck since beta of the game. A couple of years later, and making a bunch of 5/5s is still a really good strategy as it turns out, and well positioned against what Flow was trying to do here. And now we see the Battle Mage again. Flow's Lalu is now eliminated, as mentioned earlier by Laser Magician. Flow has to switch decks to something that he hasn't played yet, and he's going with the Dagoth. That was unbanned. How is it going to match up?
Well, in terms of matchups, I think this is probably the best deck in his lineup to deal with mid-range Battle Mage.
Yeah,
because
you mentioned he was going to queue it up first, actually.
I expected him to. It's got an equally scary top end, right? So you've also got your own Mighty Conjurings, things like that. But again, the presence of Hand of Dagoth specifically, when you get that big body that has ward and can drain and stabilize and help you out, I think that's a really big deal in this matchup.
Flow has ran into difficulties with finding early drops in this game, but the ring will help as the turns progress. So those 3/3 cost creatures will seem a lot better as Flow gets to space them out on the future turns.
Yeah, he's aided quite a bit there by the fact that Thuldir, while he has a card that costs 2, the reality is the Exalt mechanic that Temple Conjurer takes advantage of really makes that card a 5-drop, right? It's kind of deceptive when you see it in your hand at 2 because you're never going to play it at 2 unless you absolutely have to. So Thuldir wisely passes, and we're going to see a couple of allies seeing keywords.
This was a very interesting start for Flow. While he had the ring, the Awakened Dreamer came into his hand 1 card too far down. This could have been an incredibly explosive start if he was able to develop the Dreamer turn 1.
And really, you see the difference in the allies in the deck composition from a class standpoint. You see Thuldir hitting the ward, whereas Doomfang with the lethal is going to get trumped by the opposing Doomfang ally.
Yeah, Thuldir mostly expects to hit the ward in his deck. It's a very intelligence, blue-heavy deck. But hitting red there would have been not necessarily a blowout, but it would have left him very susceptible to anything like the Steel Scimitar, a ward crafter. But things worked out. And that might force Flow into the Steel Scimitar if he wants to keep his own Doomfang ally alive. You can see the decks on screen now if you're watching from home to look at all the wonderful lists we're looking at.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple, straightforward Dagoth deck. It's tried and true. Some interesting cards he's playing. He's including the one of Swift Strike, which could just double the amount of damage you have in a single turn.
I mean, that's a really great include, in my opinion, when you're running a deck that has full set of Mighty Conjurings and a full set of Belligerent Giants, because you can essentially burst somebody down for half their health in 1 turn.
All right. So he's going face, but he's equipping the Steel Dagger, or the Scimitar afterwards, so as to not break the rune on purpose. a Prophecy Lightning Bolt or something of that nature, just being too damaging as it would be free.
And even though Thuldir doesn't have many prophecies in his deck, the risk is still there. So a top play by Flow there.
Yeah. Now that's a play I think you would really start considering at a high stakes match like this. A lot of players on ladder would have jammed the Scimitar, jammed face. Winning faster is better, obviously, in a lot of players' eyes, but Flow's really weighing the odds here. And Thuldir forced to spend his turn on a Lightning Bolt, which isn't a really bad turn anyway.
No, I mean, that's an acceptable turn because you're just trying to get things under control. You've got the Conjurer on curve, followed up by the Elfiques, and we highlighted that as a card to watch. So Thuldir kind of knows what his next 2 to 3 turns are, realistically.
Yeah,
He's just kind of going through the motions.
He's got to hope these Atronachs are good enough because Flow's packing on the damage here. He has a ward to give his board a little bit more stability. He's definitely going to be playing 2 more creatures here. And Elfique Conjurer, for all it does when you're the one pressuring, when you're playing defensively, it's only 1 guard that it gives you. So if you don't have time to use those bodies to trade, and Flow could just use his Earthbone Spinner, silence in a couple turns, and it looks like Thuldir might actually require some sort of Prophecy here or a Harpy or something to slow this down.
If Flow's really in the driver's seat, see the Doomfang ally won the battle of Doomfang allies and remains to continue putting on the pressure.
Yeah,
There
what
can
I
only
would
be one.
what I would personally love to see right here as a plan of action, I would love to see this Wardcrafter come down on the Doomfang so that you can take the proactive trade into the Lava Atronach, and then play Dagoth Oathman so that you get maximum value, and then use your Cliff Racer to trade into the 2/2. I would also like to see a lane split so that if you are expecting Elfique to come down, it can only answer 1 lane, and then you can kind of continue to push damage from the other. So I think that is the
You're
most
much
likely
better at
sequence of
Legends than
events.
me, so
Yeah.
we're going to go with that.
All right.
No
So
lane split.
did not lane split, but did in fact take the other sequence of events there. The only reason I like the lane split is, again, if you're expecting Elfique to come down right here, then splitting means that you can still push damage, but perhaps Flow just wants to trade into the 2 bodies. I don't think that's necessarily the right call because you know it's going to be an activated Elfique at this point, right?
Yeah.
There's a Atronach that's in the discard pile that will be consumed. You're going to get a 7/5 ward out of it. I would want to kind of have a presence in a lane where that did not exist.
This matchup very important for Flow. As mentioned, his Dagoth deck is potentially some of the strongest tools to deal with this kind of matchup throughout the things Thuldir could queue. And if he wants, he could pack on the punishment here with the silence and get in a clean 12 damage. And it looks like that's what he's going to go for.
And our Elfique Conjurer total is at 1 so far in the tournament.
All right, I'm actually going to keep track of that, so give me a second here. Conjurer count. I should have told them to put this on screen. If you're keeping track at home, check our work here. Conjurer count is at 1.
All right, opted not to play the Earthbone, and I actually really like that because that leaves it in your hand for answering whatever guard or threat that you expect them to potentially play in the Shadow Lane now that you are splitting. So this is a play that I like. I also am a big fan of this card that he just played. This 3/4 Pilter, that when it hits a player, you get to draw a card and then discard a card. While it's not card advantage, it is card quality choice, right? You're getting to cycle through cards in your hand and kind of pick the best choice for that particular scenario. It's a really powerful effect.
Yeah, and that's very important as Flow sort of nears the critical game-ending turns. He's trying to close this game out. He's never going to get back to as many cards in hand as Thuldir. He's trying to reduce his life total to 0, and he can sort of filter to the cards that allow him to do that. Earthbone Spinner's fine, but if he draws, say, I don't know, another Awakened Dreamer, maybe he wants I don't know, a Lightning Bolt or something instead of that. You know, you don't really want just vanilla creatures at this point. Your board's already full of them.
And Flow's really put himself in maximum flexibility. Presence in both lanes with the Spinner to potentially answer some shenanigans and the Discerning Thief to change card quality. So it really puts Thuldir in a spot where he has to decide, where are you going to contest?
Yeah. Before we went live, I know that Jason and I had a number of conversations about Elfique Conjurer and the power level that card brings, and I think personally, Flow is demonstrating exactly how you try to target this card. It is certainly a powerful card, but if you can have a board presence before it comes down, if you can actually make it feel like a very bad play. For example, right now, you're looking at essentially a 3/4 guard, right? So
Yep.
the 3/4 guard in this scenario is not super helpful. So if you can get underneath it, kind of punish them for playing something for,
Hey, Hey,
Oh.
that looks like a keeper.
And that's the card quality that we mentioned.
Hey, I'll ditch Earthbone Spinner for that, sure. Oh, man.
Now, this is a great draw. So if you're not familiar, Unkano that was just picked up deals 5 damage to a target when it comes into play. Thuldir is only at 2 health. And as I highlighted when we were talking about the difference between Dagoth and mid-BM does not have great ways to get health back. So you're at 2. That means you are at 2 if you're this mid-range battle mage player. And
Even if Thuldir had good ways to clean up this board, which it doesn't really look like he does, it's a very hard board to clean up, to be fair. We know that Encano is sitting there waiting and impossible for Thuldir to counter. So it looks like Flow's going to clean this up in short work with Encano or his remaining board, and we might see a tied series.
And traditionally, you saw in that 6-cost slot or mid-battle mage the Telval's Magister, which was a pseudo life gain. And in this spot, you don't get that out of the Alpha Conjurer.
You definitely do not.
Let's shed some
It's a Cunning
light.
Ally coming down. Does hit, very critical that it does here.
yeah. Going through the motions here, trying to see if there is, in fact, a line to keep alive, but...
1 Magicka, 2 few.
contest.
Oh, look,
And the lightning bolt top deck, just to add insult to injury. And Flow is now tied the series. Congratulations, Flow.
Yep, Dagoth deck doing work.
It's almost like it should have been banned.
Well, I mean, I don't like playing against Hand of Dagoth, but to be fair, he didn't lose to Hand of Dagoth.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
lost everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that card, but the reality is that that color combination in general is just very good at being a true mid-range deck. It can be proactive and reactive. It's got great early game, big bodies, good stabilization. If you pilot it correctly, it is one tough deck to beat, and it's. I mean, you just saw the results right there. It's very effective when it does what it wants to do.
If I'm a tournament player and it's kind of a fresh metagame and I don't really know how things are really going to shake down or the surprise decks people are going to bring, I think I gravitate towards Dagoth. I think I'm like, that's a pretty safe pick. It'll definitely have game against everything in some way or form. Except for like, maybe, I mean, it could even beat the old Empire Abomination deck here and there.
Yeah.
It's one of the decks that actually could win a percentage of the time. All right, so it looks like Thuldir's Battle Mage is eliminated. He's down to, did he queue up the Empire? Are we going to see some Empire tokens?
No, you're looking at
I looking-
Flow's mulligan. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
on the
no.
other side, it
Yeah.
is what appears to be...
Dagoth versus Empire, I think. It's dark, and we're on the mulligan.
Well, I don't know if it's a spectate bug or not, but it's showing Scout for me.
We'll see it in a minute. It's Empire.
It is Empire.
Yeah, we're good. All right, we have Empire versus the Dagoth, and that is not necessarily a great opener. We see Flow this time doesn't have the ring. Would you just ship this back, do you think? You think you're getting rid of the Cradle Crushes and the Thief?
See, this is kind of a tough call. If I was on the ring, I would actually consider keeping 1 giant because you know you're playing against a go-wide deck in Empire.
a
And
heads-up
having that
call.
on curve with the ring could be game-winning, but when you are off-ring, I think you have to mulligan and try to find 1, 2, and 3 drops to contest the board.
You're really looking to spend your early Magicka to create as many even trades as possible.
And I kind of like mulliganing as much as possible with Dagoth. I don't know if this is necessarily... No, it's not because I don't like the card. It's because I like Hand of Dagoth so much. Like, I'll pretty much universally keep it against aggressive decks. So there's kind of an argument to just see how likely I can make Hand of Dagoth early on.
Considering Thuldir's low curve, not having a play on ring on the first turn, it's a little surprising.
Oh, well,
Even
yeah, I was
without the
gonna,
ring, he kept that giant.
I was gonna say this is the perfect case scenario for Flow. He took the greed mulligan where he only shipped back 1 giant, right? He's got Cradle Crush. He held on to it, and Thuldir no plays until 3 Magicka.
Yeah, and Thuldir's Empire deck, he's got, some tools to control the board too. He's got the Edict of Azura. You wouldn't really see that so much in a traditional token deck. But, Empire has the space for it.
My paws are quicker than your
And this
eyes.
Discerning Thief, being the bigger body who can come down, contest this Haunting Spirit.
I wouldn't say either player here had what I would call the best hand they could have possibly gotten, We don't even see the 2-drop from either player.
I actually think this is what's going to make this particular game exciting because I think what separates good players from great players is how they respond to when their deck doesn't do what it's designed to do optimally, right? When you have to get the most mileage out of your deck, when you have to play in a scenario that is uncomfortable, I think that really shines on exceptional players because they know how to navigate these bad matchups.
And you're really looking at a disappointing turn 4 play with one of your 3 drops instead of being able to fully use all your Magicka. So which choice of these 3 do you think Flow's going to choose?
I mean, if I'm looking at these 3, I think that Thief number 2 is likely the option. Sharpshooter, you kind of don't want to play unless you can activate the plot and take advantage of the silence. Corner Club is great if it draws you the cards, but in order to have that happen, you have to, 1, play it in the shadow lane so it survives, 2, discard a card as part of the activation, and then 3, hope that he doesn't have an answer. As we know through caster vision here, he does have an answer, so the conservative play, and again, you're trying to get yourself out of a bad scenario, the conservative play is to just put more bodies in the field lane, try to trade, but you do not feel good about this play.
And if I'm Flow, I'm hoping that Thuldir decides to break one of my runes to give me another card so that I can have a more efficient play on the 5th turn.
Or hit a prophecy.
Or a prophecy.
Yeah. So I suspect that Flow, when playing these bodies here, is kind of eyeing that greed keep that he went with, right? The giant. He knows that at some point he's going to have to play one of these in the field lane and hope that it cleans things up for him, and so that's why he keeps developing here as opposed to abandoning it. Thuldir very wisely knows that and decides, hey.
Speaking of on-time cards, Hand of Dagoth coming on turn 5 to be the perfect efficient play to match what Thuldir's doing.
All right, so we've certainly talked this play up quite a bit, but we're going to see it. I mean, when I'm looking at this hand, there's just no other optimal play on this turn, so it's going to come down, and normally it would be very, very effective. However, Thuldir here has one of the best answers in the game in Edict of Azura right in his pocket.
Oh, exactly. The disappointment Flow's going to feel on Thuldir's turn is immense.
How you guys doing? I was searching for a Hand of Dagoth and I found it. I just ran off stage. Go put it in his hand. Hey, here we go. Hand of Dagoth. Finally see him play in Dagoth. I like it.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we were just saying, Thuldir has the answer ready to go, tried and true. The question is, what do you pair with it, right? Because you have that marked man in hand and you have the shadow shift if you really want to cycle and find something else. With the addition of Divine Fervor, I suspect marked man will be the follow-up play.
And I expect Thuldir to decide that this is the turn when runes start breaking. Do you think that you won't risk the prophecies even at this stage?
That is an interesting call. I really feel like I would start breaking runes now.
It seems like a good enough time. I mean, there's maybe a small consideration to, you have a trade and a buff with Haunting Spirit. You could Clivia, but then you get kind of weak to things like the Cradle Crush Giant coming down soon. And I don't know too much what you're going to save Edict for if it's not this. This is the prime target.
Yeah. The opportunity to start pressuring and have your opponent have no cards on board while you're going to be going wide and trying to set up a Divine Fervor the following turn. I mean, it's just too tempting at this stage in the game, and I'm very, very happy that Thuldir made me look smart by taking that exact path.
And this board is really not susceptible to Cradle Crush Giant whatsoever.
No, I mean, you're essentially going to get rid of an 0-2, which feels lackluster, or a single 1-1, and even that 0-2 is going to survive on the following turn, again, once Divine Fervor comes down. So normally Cradle Crush is great in this matchup, but Thuldir figured out a way to just kind of perfectly navigate through this game, and Flow actually might be punished by taking that mulligan now.
Yeah, there's a super, super high amount of Cradle Crush Giant decks, from Battle Mage to Guildsworn to Dagoth even. So 3 health is really the benchmark where you want your creatures to sit. You will see a lot of the players throughout this tournament making the trades that if they can't just push for the game, they'll be making the trades that keep their creatures at that level. Back in the day, it was you wanted everything at 4 because there were tons of Ice Storms. But now it's mostly Cradle Crush Giants that you're watching out for. And I guess that also plays around Debilitate. I think one person brought Debilitate, so...
And I wouldn't be surprised if Alfie Conjure was the play either. Put the bodies on the board, be able to contest, and to slow down Thuldir's involvement.
And that is going to be the play, but I have highlighted earlier that one of the ways you play around Alfiq is to get under it and make it feel You know, like not the greatest play. I think this is, I mean, you can make the case for another scenario where that is exactly what's happening because, yes, Elfeet comes down or Elfeet counter goes to 2 now for the day. However,
Oh,
once.
thank you for that. I almost
Yeah.
missed it.
So once Divine Fervor does come down, you can essentially trade into everything on the board. You're only going to lose your Haunting Spirit, which will still buff something else with +3/+3. So like your net stats on the board is going to go down by 1 health, right? You're in a commanding position if you're Thuldir right now. And he high rolls the landing for 4 damage there.
You're going to see Clivia come down here,
Bow to these provincial
start to populate the board, and make sure that the presence on both
Standing
lanes
by.
continues.
Yeah, that board is very populated. And looks like Flo can answer exactly one thing this turn, so he has to choose. And you could bounce Clivia back for some tempo. You could get rid of Marked Man easily.
You could go
Oh,
with
he can
something
answer
like
two.
an Earthbone
Yeah.
Spinner on the 4/4 and then a Sharpshooter the 4/1 in the other lane.
All right, yeah, he could do that. There's still going to be 4 things left on the board, but you are answering at least a third of it, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah. I mean, you don't feel great about that play, but that's probably your best option just in terms of trying to stay alive to fight another day.
And you're going to see the Divine Fervor come down to make those creatures that are seemingly small that survive even bigger.
Yeah, and the combination of Divine Fervor with Clivia is kind of backbreaking because every turn she's making bodies, and it's so much value.
Yeah, Clivia definitely one of the best tricolor cards coming out in Alliance War, second to last set. One of those cards, sort of like Hand of Dagoth, maybe a bit slower, but it really sort of defines the match. In an aggressive mirror match, is a very high-pressure card that if it's not dealt with immediately and efficiently, it can just completely snowball the board.
I only need
So we do see that combination. Does pull those 2 targets off the board, reduces the damage taken by 8. But Thuldir,
This is actually tough because, I mean, Divine Fervor looks really good, but you also have some really powerful 3 costs you could play too. Getting Pit Line on the board against a Dagoth deck that doesn't have Hand of Dagoth on board, the only answer to that's really like a Belligerent Giant or Incano.
chimeric
We are seeing the Fervor though. Here it comes. That makes the total damage possible 10 right now.
Typically, you see the Belligerent Giant as a potential answer to the Fervor, but I don't think there's going to be time.
No time. You can get rid of the Fervor, but you're still staring down well over 6.
I'm very surprised that the pit line came down in the shadow lane.
You think it was just maybe a call to keep protecting the Clivia? I mean, at this point, Thuldir just needs bodies to stick. It doesn't really matter which ones they are, though. So, yeah, I could see it in either lane, really.
Yeah, I mean, going in the shadow lane, it's 100% protecting the Clivia. But the only reason I was surprised was because if you were going to go through those 2 guards, it was going to be through something with like Cradle Crush, and Cradle Crush would have killed the Earthbone Spinner on Flow's side as well. So the only thing left to attack Clivia would have been the Sharpshooter. So I'm just kind of surprised that went there.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing where I don't think he loses if he plays it in the field, but it doesn't look like he's losing now either. So it could have just been like, I want to deal with finishing blow with Clivia.
And from a long-term aspect,
Be
if Clivia lives, Thuldir lives, then the
Yeah.
chance of winning increases every turn.
So we finally see that Cradle Crush come down.
And Awakened Dreamer, getting that buff.
Now, a Prophecy Harpy or something to that effect
Would only
Would-
make it 3 damage
would
overkill.
not have saved you. Yeah, I was just about to say, as long as you lead off with Clivia, that's going to be lethal. And so just like that, Thuldir is now up 2-1
yeah.
in the series.
On match point, and he defeats the Dagoth deck, which I'm sure he was worried about of all the decks that were unbanned, is probably the scariest. And Hand to Dagoth saw play just wasn't enough. Maybe he felt comfortable enough because he included cards like Edict of Azure that are actually very efficient. We've seen control decks answering Hand of Dagoth for months now with just cards like that 1-for-1. So an aggressive deck that's able to use that high tempo removal on a 5-cost creature that did nothing, it worked out really well for him. And now he has to win with either his Empire, or if he loses, he's down to his Lalu, I believe, that was unbanned. And all he has to do is defeat Flo's Crusader. Do you think Flo's Crusader has a chance here to pull out the upset and beat both of those decks?
I mean, it certainly has a chance. I think that last game was actually pretty much decided by the mulligans and the opening hands, right? Like, both players had some very clunky starts. Crusader is a deck that historically punishes clunky starts. And so if Thuldir runs into a little bit of that again, this list can absolutely get the job done.
And there's a mulligan looks like Flow once again, not on the ring. Has Varen. Really, really good card in aggressive mirror matches like this. If he chooses to keep it, I wouldn't be super surprised. The rest of the hand is kind of bits and pieces here.
I got your hot take for you. I think Varen is hot garbage in the aggressive mirror because I don't care if he gained 5 health.
You don't care if I gain 5 health?
I have found in my testing that over and over and over again, I'm happy if my opponent plays Varen because that means that they're not going to be triggering prophecies and they're not going to be drawing cards. And 5 health is just not a difference maker. If I was Flow, I would mulligan Varen there, and I would feel very good about it.
Well, it didn't happen, so I'm not as washed up as some people might think. Charmer.
And we really saw the opposite. We saw the pit line go away, even though the Firebrand is good at making sure that it stays active.
Yeah, it's a weird mulligan, I think, but it really worked out. Look at that Scimitar in play. That means he could start going at him right now with a 3-3 on turn 1 with charge. It costs 2 cards, but it's a lot of damage that can add up over time. But Thuldir's hand is probably about as good defensively as it gets for like the first 2 turns of a game. You have ample ways to shackle. Wily Kiva trades very well with a variety of cards in Flow's deck.
Yeah, I will say this about Varen. Another reason that I'm not super keen on it, and I think mulliganing it was probably correct, is that it doesn't do anything to advance my own aggressive game plan. It's kind of helping me play to not lose, but if I'm an aggro player, I want to play to win. Right? This isn't going to help him finish Thuldir off any faster. And it being in his hand, it means that he's kind of already planning to be behind, right? That he's going to need health. I don't want to need health if I'm the aggressive player.
So Thuldir's token deck is so good at taking over the field lane, though. Do you think maybe Flow was thinking, I'm going to be forced into the race situation. I'm going to take the shadow lane because I'm going to have to, and I just have to race. He's going to be dealing damage, and Varen can help me win that race. But I agree that
Varen helps my opponent
later.
not race as much, but he doesn't help me win the race. That's my point. Varen does nothing for me aggressively.
Not losing the race and winning the race can be the same.
Yeah, but it's not the kind of tempo change that something like a giant snake offers. Listen,
No,
I said it was a hot take at the start,
It's
but
a
I
hot
stand
take,
by
yeah.
it.
Would you mulligan Varen? Let us know in the chat. We can't actually read the chat, but I'm sure it's a fun discussion to
Yeah,
have.
tweet at us. Use the Master Series hashtag. Varen is overrated. Varen's washed up. Let me hear it.
Washed up.
And more than anything, Varen wasn't a 2 or a 3 cost. So the Mud Crab is going to fill out the turn, but Varen's still a while away.
Yeah.
He's just hanging out there. Yeah, Varen's washed up. There you go. Varen Van Hoos is the new designation for this.
Oh, Laser's losing it. Knight of Genesis. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced that way. You don't see this card a lot unless it comes off of Mudcrab Merchant. That could actually be pretty good. Like, it's not really, it doesn't not fit the theme of an Empire token deck.
Yeah, if anything, that's kind of amazing for Thuldir because he's got this like whole host of 1-drops that he can play right now. Like with the ring, he can choose to develop Marked Man and both Trappers if he wants. And then Knight of Nisus will just turn around and add more cards to his hand again. And now you might say to yourself, well, why would I play all of those 1-drops? The answer is Moose. So these 1-drops all have guard or they give you a guard. And when you have this Wilds Incarnate in your hand that if your runes are unbroken, when it comes down, you get to draw 2 extra cards. It's a lot of value. So protecting that first and second rune is actually really important right now.
So it looks like Flo is kind of forced into developing Gourmet here. If he wants to develop something, it's kind of his only chance to hold on to the field lane. But of course, if he does that, that Knight might just stick around for a while, which could be pretty annoying in its own right. And, give him a guard, give him probably a guaranteed rally.
Yeah, it would have been a great turn for a Pit Lion.
When is it not, though?
You gotta love when a Mudcrab Merchant gives you both a card and that card can defeat the card that you give. So Thuldir choosing not to play the Knight, but instead playing both of these Trappers, made it so that the Grizzly Gourmet doesn't get to just trump the Knight.
So we are going to see the Knight come down. And I imagine the makeshift defenses as well, because again, if you're thinking about trying to protect that Moose, it's a good time to do it.
Yeah, and it has the added benefit of not letting Flo get any value out of Ulfric's Housecarl if you decided to go that route.
Interesting. So there is a possibility here. If he's thinking about that Shadow Lane, he actually might be using his last ring charge to Shadow Shift it over, just to cycle. No. All right.
Just a Knight. He says, you don't have a second Grizzly Gourmet.
Well, what he's really saying is that I don't really want to get all of the cards from my Moose.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, he knows he doesn't have a second Grizzly Gourmet because it's not organically in the deck.
And with Rally being on the Knight, really gives Thuldir an opportunity to strand that in the shadow and have those little rally buffs that increase the size of creatures in your hand, build up over time. So since Thuldir may not have been threatened by the field lane, it gives him an opportunity for a long-term advantage.
Yeah, the one downside though, and the reason that I felt like he was going to defend that field lane is that now this Ulfric's House Carl is going to come down and draw a card for Flow. And now you're still stuck trying to find answers for that field lane, or he's going to keep drawing cards.
Yeah, and Hive Defender, a pretty good card to draw. All
Yeah,
things considered.
That's a great pickup there for Flow, because that will help him defend the board that he's kind of already developed there in the field lane.
All right, Knight's moving over here. Can take a pretty nice trade over the Gourmet. And still a variety of options for Thuldir this turn. He has another Marked Man that came to the hand, so he could pair that with Pit Lion if he wants. He has Apprentice Necromancer now that just got the buff. Oh, it'll get Deepwood Trapper.
Deepwood Trapper, yeah.
That's brutal.
Yeah, this Apprentice Necromancer is a fantastic card in a deck like Empire because there are a number of great options that you can bring back.
It's really one of the cards that drives this archetype as being as strong as it is for this tournament.
Yeah, and so Thuldir being the only person who brought it, and no one bringing Spell Sword tokens that I can remember. I hope I'm not wrong there, but it looks like these are the only Apprentice Necromancers we're probably going to see.
One other player, but
you
yeah,
think
like
really?
it's very rare.
Okay. We'll see another Apprentice Necromancer later, but it's not going to be a thing where, like Alfie Conjure, we have to start a count.
No.
Which is somehow only at 2, but I'm sure
So-
it'll increase.
Flow's in a really tough spot here because if you want to trade into both of the guards, you have to use Orc Clan Captain to buff your Mudcrab Merchant. But if you do that, you're doing nothing else this turn. You don't have enough Magicka for Hive Defender or Varen, and you would have to play it in the field lane, which means Pit Lion could not be played. Now, you could play your Orc Clan Captain in the Shadow Lane, then develop Pit Lion in the field lane to start contesting, but then you've stranded your Clan Captain with no value. So I imagine what we're going to end up seeing here is likely either Hive Defender or Varen come down in the field to, again, continue contesting there. I think Hive Defender makes the most sense because it forces them to interact with it, and it also kind of protects your own Ulfric's House Carl for at least one more turn.
We really saw Flow play lower tempo play in the House Carl to gain resources in the future, and you see that kind of biting him when Thuldir is able to use a one-piece to really lock that House Carl down for multiple turns, changing the tempo flow quite a bit.
All right. So Flow, it actually looks like, is kind of just conceding the field lane and wants to race. It's going to start developing in the Shadow Lane. This is perhaps the game plan because of Varen. He's saying, okay, I'm just going to pivot to trying to race. I kept this Varen on my mulligan. I might as well get some value out of it, and we'll do it this way.
Yeah, I think that'd be a lot more effective if Thuldir didn't just have so many guards in his hand. He's getting a rally, and it hits one of the guards.
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic one for it to hit because now you can feel confident by playing that over there and then developing your own Pit Lion if you want. Or you could go with the Emperor's Blade and another Marked Man followed by another Makeshift Defenses. Yeah, the options are kind of endless for Thuldir right now.
Yeah, nothing quite deals with Pit Lion by itself, but Blade plus Marked Man would do it. If you let the Colovian Trooper down and it deals some damage to the Pit Lion, your Pit Lion still would have to trade even. So it's kind of questionable. We'll see what he goes with.
Looks like he's going with stats.
Yeah, I'm thinking that he actually might not be considering about Pit Lion trading even next turn. He can go aggressive if he wants and then just protect his own Pit Lion with the guards he has in hand. Because all three of the cards either have guard or make guard that he has left.
That is very true. Hive Defender might actually be pretty annoying in one lane, but yeah, that Knight looks like it might stick around for a while, depending on how much. Actually, I guess you could start even playing back in the field, right? If you really wanted to.
I think he wants to try to keep this Pit Lion alive, but unfortunately that means the Knight will get another rally trigger. If it lands on the Wild's Incarnate, then that actually forces a 2-for-1 in that Shadow Lane.
Oh yeah, that'd be absolutely brutal.
Yeah, he would still get to draw at least one card, and he would end up with a 6/7 guard over there. That is dangerous.
So Thuldir's Empire token deck definitely proving that it can play defensively. It's turn 6 in this aggro mirror, and only a single rune has been broken on either side.
Yeah, Thuldir's taking his time because this is actually a really tough decision. In the field lane specifically, you can attack with Knight and then use your 4-1 to trade if you don't want to break the rune. You could trade with the Knight if you want to keep the 4-1 for more value, and it looks like that's the option he's taken. But that's not an easy decision because there is an argument to be made about either line there. And because he's done this, I would be shocked if he attacks with the 4-1 at this point. I think he's actually going to pass and just not break this rune right now.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's worth giving Flow an extra card here. He's very starved on resources. As long as he takes out the Shadow Lane, things are looking very good for Thuldir.
Did you hear that?
And Flow with the Varen in his hand becomes a much less attractive option, as the card denial from not drawing the card from your broken runes would really give Thuldir the opening to attack and play the resource game.
Right, because again, at that point, the 5 health doesn't matter nearly as much as the card. And this is, again, before the stream, we've been talking about this weekend when I go on my rants about Varen, why I think he's a double-edged sword. I know that he gets a lot of praise, and certainly he can be effective at times, but he is not the auto win that some people think that he can be in these aggro mirrors.
Oh, definitely double-edged. And fortunately, Flow has some other options if he wants. He could play things like the Rift Thane, but it's going to come to a point where he needs the bodies on board, but he also needs cards. But Thuldir has proven that he's not really going to give Flow too many cards anyway, but when Thuldir eventually does decide he needs to start wrapping things up, it would be nice to get some cards out of the deal.
Yeah, Flow's, in my opinion, he's in a really tough spot here because you can't leave this pit line on the board realistically. And so if you're trading into that, you're left with a card left in the Shadow Lane that's going to die to one of these marked men. Yeah, so he does make the trade, and then you get to develop 2 threats, but you're out of cards.
And your board doesn't really trade too well against these marked men, which is in itself kind of a depressing thing to say. You'd think you could at least trade over marked man, but
Well, you get to take the proactive trade here with the Shining Saint if you want, because you can guarantee that your 2/2 trades even with the Rift Thane, which I think is a victory.
it's true.
So this is, again, a great spot. You could also opt to just play Wilds Incarnate if you want to put down a big guard.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not Thuldir decides to change gears, breaking the first rune to allow the East March Crusader to draw a card to get deeper and get more options.
I actually really like that. I think that is potentially a great path, right? Breaking just a single rune to make sure your East Marches are activated, but Thuldir, even though he's playing an aggressive deck, is still a control player at heart, doesn't want to break those runes.
And it kind of works out because it looks like Flow's going to be forced to play Varian this turn. Like he needs to put stats on the board. Putting one Rift Thane on the board isn't really going to be enough. And as soon as Varian's on the board, those rune breaks become essentially free for Thuldir. He deals 4 the heal, or he deals 5 if he wants. Flow heals for 5, and then all of a sudden East March Crusaders perfectly active.
And this is really the second game in a row where we've seen a keep on a mulligan turn out to not be the defining card that the player thought it was, with Cradle Crush last game and Varen this game.
Is he thinking about potentially the field?
I will light the dragonfires, as all true emperors
Decides to go Shadow.
And at this point, Flow knows at the very least that Thuldir has multiple makeshift defenses, so it's not too hard to block incoming
And
damage.
on top of it, the pickup here of Surin Pawnbroker, which can very easily give you some value here. You've got the Corner Club that you just drew that you can use to discard one of these defenses and potentially draw more cards. You're going to see polar opposite hand states. Flow's going to be out of cards with no ways to get additional cards from the rune breaks because he developed the Varen, and Thuldir is going to be drawing all of the cards he could ever want. This is exactly the nightmare scenario for a Varen player that you don't want to run into.
Now, do you go with Pawnbroker or Saint here? Because you can't do everything with the Corner Club Gambler.
Personally,
He's hovering over Pawnbroker.
Personally, I'm okay with developing Pawnbroker because there's a chance that I just like high roll into Suppress or something anyway, but if my opponent takes a value trade and gets rid of my marked man, I don't feel terrible.
Shining Saint it is, and then of course Corner Club Gambler is just too appealing. Really wants to get that down because seems like there's no way to deal with it.
And the defenses come down, making Varen feel very, very bad right now.
So Wily Kiva will play because there are no other options, and Thuldir is going to quickly increase his hand size to 4.
Very lonely Wily Kiva spending. With 9 available Magicka, really accentuates the resource battle that's going on right now as the Gambler draws 2 additional cards for Thuldir.
I feel bad for the Kiva. And there's a Saint, so it might just die.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I imagine we're gonna see Saint, Pawnbroker, and Emperor's Blade. That just seems to be a very efficient use of the Magicka there.
Close Call is actually pretty interesting here. There's a lot of ways you could use that. You could bounce Apprentice Necromancer or East March Crusader to get some more cards, or you could just use it to reuse Cliff Racer when you finally decide to go in for what looks like it might be a one-turn kill that Thuldir is trying to set up, a 1 or 2 turn strike.
Yeah, so we saw Thuldir kind of like mouse over Varen there briefly, but I do not like this plan. Varen does not need to be respected, Thuldir. Just plow face. Who cares if he gains health? You're denying him card draw. No, this could actually get Flow back into this depending on how it goes.
Oh, he wants more cards.
Well, why not?
We're not going to see Close Call and Cliff Racer. He's going to Close Call to get rid of the Cliff Racer.
Interesting choice.
What a shock.
Choosing not the 2-cost Shining Saint in the late game, getting rid of the Cliff Racer.
Yeah, he wants to keep that Saint so he can keep trading into whatever Flow develops in the Shadow Lane, so I understand it. But it would have been even more impactful if Varen was left there, because you could continue hitting him in the face knowing he's only getting 1 card a turn ever.
Oh, we're seeing Emperor's Blade's Slay effect and gain some health. Is Thuldir going to leave him at a clean 21?
Yeah, I think so. He's been super conservative up until this point as far as the rune breaks go, and he's likely just going to try to set up some sort of alpha strike where he swings for most of, if not all of Flow's health in a single turn.
The danger's really all been mitigated. The same health total despite the additional resources that Thuldir is flexing. Really in total control at this point.
Yep, the board is fully developed. 8 cards to 0. Resolute Ally very past its peak of usefulness. And it looks like we're going to see Thuldir try to wrap things up here, attacking with Haunting Spirit first, so he's able to sacrifice it for another creature, giving him a 7 out of 8 chance to buff something else. Doing it again.
Wow.
God, that thing is huge.
That is a Necromancer that hit the gym.
And there we have it. Thuldir wraps it up with his Token Empire deck and takes the match 3 games to 1.
Yeah, congratulations, Thuldir. Very well piloted, very well navigated. Impressive victory.
Yeah, I said it was probably likely that Empire token deck, maybe if it wasn't banned, sort of decided how well the series went for him, and it did its thing. You know, he's probably very happy with how that went.
Well, that's the first series in the books, Thuldir 3-1. Is that exactly what we expected, I think? We had a little bit of a split prediction on the desk before we started here.
Well, I kind of gave a half answer. I guessed for Flow. I was wrong, but I did say, I hope Empire does well at least, so I kind of won in that respect, but I was wrong. That's 1 score less for me.
But what I want to talk about is that Dagoth deck, the one that Charmer was thinking was going to be really, really impactful here. Definitely got up and going in one game, fell a little flat in the next game. Talk to me a little bit about how that match where that deck fell flat went.
Well, to me, I think that it really fell flat at the second game because the mulligan, he took the greed mulligan, right? Like you kept the giant and you kept a 3-drop, but you did not have the ring, right? So you were either hoping to top deck something or you were just game planning on taking the first 2 turns of the game off. I'm not sure that that's necessarily the right path because I think that the list is very good at every stage of the game, but you got to give it the opportunity to do just that. And instead it was just immediately saying, okay, I'm playing for the late game, and it got punished for it.
And then, Jason, we had that Dark Horse deck in the Aggro Empire. Talk to me a little bit about that one. That was a deck I really wanted to see perform and did really, really well.
Exactly, and you really saw that the tools that the Empire aggro deck has to prevent the control tools from flipping things. When you saw Thuldir able to navigate around potential Cradle Crush Giants and really make sure to populate both sides of the board and to make sure that there's no way to control it.
Yeah. Was there any standout moments between these games for any of you guys? Anything you're going to really be looking to emulate for Thuldir in the next coming games, perhaps?
Thuldir's Thuldir. He's going to do what he does, right? So there's nothing really to emulate. You just have to be one of the best players in the game like he is and keep doing exactly that. It's going to be a tough road for anybody that has to go through Thuldir, but there are some great players in the tournament, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we can see the reactions on screen there. Flow knowing it's over, Thuldir having that nice moment of relief. And in fact, we are bringing Thuldir onto the stage for an interview in just a moment. Flow talking to himself, you know what? I've been through this situation before, man. I know when the card's not on my side. I know when the game is taken. I will say, though, that Encanto pull was really nice. That was fun to watch.
And I do believe that we'll be graced very, very shortly with the James Bond villain himself, Thuldir, who I gotta say is going to be extra scary this particular tournament. I don't know if people remember, but last year he found out he was coming very late. He traveled for like 30 hours.
Oh my God.
And he had like no sleep, and then still put on one of the best performances that we'd seen at the Master Series. This is a well-rested, well-prepared Thuldir. Like, you should be scared if you're running into this guy.
And here we have the man himself on stage. Thuldir, congratulations on getting through the quarterfinals. How's it feel?
Thank you very much, Laser.
It's got to be exciting, right? Did the matchup play out how you expected it to?
Yeah, every game is different, and you can't prepare for every single draw. But I've practiced the matchups a lot, and yeah, I'm very happy with the especially with how the Empire performed.
It performed very, very well. That was a deck I was very excited to see you play. I think it performed very admirably. Talk to me a little bit about when you were playing against the Crusader deck. How did you feel when you saw Varen Aquilarios come down? How did you decide to play around breaking the runes without having to give over cards?
Yeah, I think I made a small mistake there actually in,
yeah?
in that game. Yeah, when I could have broken another rune and without giving him a card.
Charmer feels so vindicated right now. But, I mean, hey, small misplays aside, I think you played very, very well. You should be very proud of yourself for how you performed in that. What from this series that you're maybe thinking about are you going to take into the next series? Anything you're really trying to keep in mind? Anything to look out for as you go along the rounds in this tournament?
Yeah, just stay focused on the game, and yeah, always I always have a few questions that I ask myself before playing a card, and go through these, take my time for every turn, and I think this will be the key to find the optimal line every turn.
All right, well, you heard it here, folks. Ask yourself a couple of key questions. Be one of the best players in the game. These things do help. Thank you very much, Thuldir. Good luck going forward. We are going to take a quick look at the bracket and see what great games we have coming up next. We will have QuakeCon Zul taking on Weeda. Later in the day, Super Thanks and Fafal will be going at it, and we'll round out the quarterfinals with Frenzy and Boom's Life. QuakeCon Zul and Weeda. Charmer, you have a couple opinions on QuakeCon Jul's deck lineup that you were talking about earlier today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think QuakeCon Jul has some of the best deck building tendencies in the game. He's very much the kind of person who likes to give him an out in every game, right? That's why we see his deck list with a lot of ones and two ofs. This time around, he's brought a very interesting Redoran list that I think is very good. I would be shocked if it's not the one that's banned, but that's getting ahead of myself. I also really like his Archer list against the field because I think it targets mid-range Battle Mage very well. But as we mentioned earlier, Witta didn't bring mid-range Battle Mage. He brought a very aggressive one, so I'm curious to see how that Archer list in particular ends up performing against a much faster Battle Mage.
And Jason, any last thoughts before we take a break right here?
It was really interesting to watch Thuldir pilot the Empire deck in two different directions. So we got to see an opportunity where it played aggro, and then it got to play mid. So that was a really great use of resources. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the way that Witta and QuakeCon's non-traditional choices, how they shape up against one another.
All right, well, you heard it here. The nicest boogeyman to ever grace Elder Scrolls Legends moves on past the quarterfinals. We are going to come back for more awesome gameplay right after this Quake break. Don't go anywhere.